Hello, this is the Bite Weasel, and in this video we'll be continuing our Roblox Tycoon journey, this time taking a look at what we can add to make our Tycoon longer. So we are getting very close to being able to publish our Tycoon and calling the series finished and moving on to another type of game. But we're not quite there yet, though we are close, because we have this nice looking world that we've spent time creating. Hopefully you've spent a little more time and it's even better on your game. But we also have the actual Tycoon itself, which has most of the basic Tycoon mechanics there. We have the ability to, unlock droppers that create money for us. We have the ability to unlock upgraders that can change the value of those dropped items. We have the new mechanic that we added for upgrading to give the user a sort of compelling choice between what to buy next. We have the ability to rebirth, and we have the ability to actually start earning Robux by people buying a boost for money, and I think a permanent double money pass that we sort of added as examples for you to add to your game. But of course, you will need to customize the code to make it work with whatever your theme is for your Tycoon. So this is pretty good. Um, but even with all of those mechanics in place, the Tycoon itself, certainly the one we have here, but probably even yours if you've been going through the series, can feel a little too short, right? We only have the ability to sort of build in this one area, which is kind of small. And once you get to the end of that, well, what are you going to do? So we need a way of being able to extend the lifetime of our Tycoon, probably by building our building upwards, as well as sort of making it so that when we do sort of enclose the area by building a second level or a third level, we have the ability to actually add some windows into this thing so that we can see and everything doesn't become pitch black. So in this video, we're just going to take a look at how we can sort of build a second level onto our Tycoon, as well as a couple of fixes and a couple of tweaks to the mechanics and stuff we already have. So let's take a look at that. Before getting too far into that, we do need to fix a bug left over from our previous upgrade mechanic episode. So if you recall, last time we made these new sort of different buttons that instead of building something, upgrade an existing something. And the way that we did that is we added this brand new table into our profile data that gets stored. And then this upgrade table gets looked at when things get dropped to figure out how much money that new drop is worth. Well, the thing that we missed was actually called out by someone in the comments. So shout out to that person. Um, Rebirthing does not work. So right now, if you were to rebirth this factory after purchasing some upgrades, those upgrades stay with you forever. We probably don't want that. We probably want to reset it back to zero. Maybe in your game you don't, but you probably want to figure out where to customize it at least. And so it's really easy because we already do something very similar with the rest of our rebirth mechanic. So if I go into the buttons script and we go up to the top where we actually handle the pressing of the button, and then inside our logic here where we check to see if it's the rebirth button, all we're doing is we've simply forgot to reset the table. Much like we do with these other values, we can say profile.upgrades equals a brand new table. And that will allow us to reset upgrades back to the beginning so that when we rebirth, you no longer have saved upgrade values. Okay, so let's focus on how we can make this sort of Tycoon a little longer. Obviously, we can spend more time adding buttons, and that's what I expect you to do as you're following this series. For your Tycoon, you're probably going to have more buttons, more droppers, a second belt that drops into a cellar somewhere, all of that kind of stuff. But if you're using this kind of shape of Tycoon, you're going to get stuck because there's only so much room that we have. So let's look at how we would make something like a second level to our Tycoon. And this is pretty common in a lot of Tycoon games because, of course, they want you to play for a long time. So they want to have many, many buttons. And if you just have a single layer, it's going to be hard to add them. So, how could we add a second level? Well, I think it's going to be quite simple, and it's going to rely on most of our existing sort of abilities to buy and show things that we already have. So there's not going to be a lot of code customization to begin with, but we are going to sort of take a look at how to do it. So here we have our existing walls, right? And these things go around our tycoon, but right now they're kind of short. So if we wanted a second level on our tycoon, really we need a second sort of set of walls, or we can sort of increase the size of these walls. And that's, I think, what I'm going to do, at least for this demo. So I know that a player is about 6 studs high. So maybe if I change it to maybe 10 something, that is going to be, what was it, 11? Yeah, that's going to be high enough, maybe 12, twice as tall as a player. That's going to be high enough for a player to walk around in, and it's going to look good. So what we can do is change all of these parts then of our walls to be that high so that they're all exactly equal. And then the one last thing is we'll also need to change their Y position so that they are all starting on the ground. Right? Something like this, you'll be seeing the walls sort of rise up out of the ground as I move this starting position. So there we go. We have now walls that are tall enough to build on top of. Now, maybe you don't want to increase the size of these walls. Maybe you want a second set of walls that you buy with another button. You certainly could do it that way. But what we're going to do is we're going to take these walls and we're going to take the floor and we're going to duplicate it. Then those things together, we can move up. And now we've got a second level to our tycoon, right? We can enable collisions and we can sort of push it down on top of that so that it sits exactly on top of that wall. There you go. Nice. So this is kind of what it's going to look like inside. And at the beginning of the video, I talked about, hey, maybe we should make some way of letting light in here because it's going to get dark if you add a ceiling on top of this sort of sealed room. So we'll look at that next. But for now, what we're going to do is group these things up as a model and call this model, I don't know, the second level, right? The second level of the tycoon. Now, to unlock the second level, we're going to need a new button that points to second level, right? Very similar to how we build everything else in this tycoon. We're going to take a button, we're going to duplicate it, and we're going to change the unlock ID to be something unique. In this case, second level. And of course, you can change the price and you can customize all these things. We'll say 400. But what you need to do is for this button, change what item to buy is linked to. So this is an object value that points to something else in the hierarchy. So we can go down and choose second level. So now this button here will unlock the second level. But when we do that, we need to specify that in our game using our unlock order. So the first thing to decide is what should unlock this new second level button. So I think when you buy the walls button here, currently we show no other button afterwards, but I want to say you unlock the second level button, right? And then the second level button itself needs to say what it unlocks after you buy that button. So for now, we're going to say nothing, but obviously this is where you would start putting things inside your second level, right? So if you had another kind of dropper up there or a belt you wanted people to buy, this is where you would start unlocking it. Much like we do here, it just fits in directly with our existing mechanics. Nothing magical there. So if I was to test it, we should now be able to unlock a second level. Oh no, it didn't work. You're thinking, why are there floating second levels everywhere? Well, that's because this second level itself is actually a model that contains models, right? If you looked closely, what we would see is that the floor was not shown. This got correctly hidden with our existing logic, but the walls that were grouped together in a sub-model did not get hidden. So there are two ways to sort of fix this. One, you could just take all of these parts, move them into the second level itself without the model. And then that would work correctly. Or you could come into your helpers function and you could go to where we customize the buy item and the show item. And in here, what you could do is instead of looking at the direct children of a model, which we do here and we do here, you could change this to get descendants, so that not only does it look through the model itself, but any sub-models that are there. And you could do this. The reason that I'm choosing to do just moving the model out is because, one, I don't really need a model that says part of the walls when the model itself is so small anyway. And two, if you change it to get descendants, it will make the game a tiny bit slower because it has to go through all sub-dependencies on each one of these things. So for most of the time, that isn't a big deal because we don't have anything under these. But you can imagine if it went through a button, it's now going to have to look into the cost and title. So it'll be a tiny bit slower. But the amount of models and items that we have, you would not notice. But if you've got a really, really big game, like you've got 50 different plots in the game, maybe it would make a difference to you. So for now, I'm just going to keep it get children, and I've moved those into the second level model itself rather than a submodel. But that's a choice that you can make for your game. So now, obviously, our code works as expected. We have this new button that's going to be shown after you unlock walls. And then when you buy that, it's going to show a second level on the thing. Now, this is going to take a long time for me to actually wait enough to unlock this. Whoops, too early. And then grab a second level. So what I'm just going to do is go into my data script, and I'm going to change my default value of money to be some large amount, right? I'm going to make sure that I put this back before I publish the game. But for now, whenever I join the game, I will have this, 100,000 cash that I can spend on buying things. So now I should be able to get to those walls and get to that second level pretty quickly. But you can see how dark it gets when that happens. So we'll fix that in a bit. But now we have this second level. How are we going to get up to this second level? Well, there are many ways to do it. What I want to do is first off close this giant gap here. And that's because in the one at the bottom there, we have a signpost. So I'm just going to close it up, make sure that that all collides correctly. So now you can't fall out of the second level. And now I'm going to make a gap where I want people to sort of come in through some stairs. But you can imagine you could also make an elevator, or you could make a ladder or something that they could use to climb to the second level. A ladder is pretty easy. It's sort of built in already to Roblox. As long as your parts are a certain width apart, Roblox characters will climb up them. So ladders is easy. And teleports, you've also seen a way of how to do it. We already have this teleport code, so you could just copy that and hook it into a teleport button. So when they stood on the button, they get teleported to the top. But I'm going to show you how to make some stairs. Really easy. The first thing we're going to do is cut out a hole in this second level where the stairs can come, right? So I want to do it about here. So I'm going to make a new part. And I'm going to make sure this part is anchored before I do anything else. And now I'm going to resize it to about the size that I want a gap in my floor to be. So I want it to come up some stairs around about here. And then what I'm going to do is make sure that with collisions turned on, it sort of hits the wall, exactly where I want it. And now I've accidentally moved it, but I'm going to have it, not inside the thing directly, but against that wall, against the floor. And then I'm going to make it slightly bigger than the width of the floor. So turn off collisions, move this down. So now I have this part that sort of intersects the floor there, right? And what I'm going to do to actually make a hole in this thing is I'm going to choose my part, which is the hole, and I'm going to go over to model, and I'm going to choose negate. And this actually turns my part pink and into a negative part. And what this negative part thing is, you've sort of seen it before when we created this ring around there. When you union it with something, it makes a hole. So we're going to take that, we're going to union it with this floor up here by selecting both and then clicking union. And now our floor has a wonderful hole in it. And that works just fine for us. Then you would go ahead and make your ladder or make some stairs. So in my case, I guess we're going to make some stairs. Obviously, I want you to go ahead and spend more time doing this on your game. Where did that part end up? You make a part and then it appears in the air above your head. Cool. So we're going to want it here, sort of, why is it rotating around? We want it against this wall, and we're going to use it to sort of line up some lovely stairs. So we're going to scale it this way so that we can have a staircase going upwards. So remember to anchor it so it doesn't get affected by gravity. And now we're going to duplicate it and sort of move it down, move it across. Now that's going to be a bit annoying because it's going to use random numbers. So what you can do is go over to model and check this for how much you want to move each thing by. And I'm going to choose one stud. So it's much easier to sort of make sure that these things are exactly, 2 studs down or whatever. Now, I guess I didn't do that exactly the same each way. But you can make sure that when you're doing this, it's exactly the right amount of studs for your game. In fact, that's going to take so long and it's going to be too short. Look at that. So we're going to move these down a little more. Probably 2 studs each. I don't know what the actual height requirement of a thing is. We should look that up. But obviously move these down until... Why do I have 2 there? That's interesting. Until you have enough stairs that allow your character to climb up. So now we'll take all those stairs, move them into that second level, although you could make another model and have them have to purchase the stairs. But I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to have it free as part of my second level. So we should get walls, should get second level, and now I have these wonderful stairs that I can sort of walk up and down. Now you're going to wonder, where the heck has my floor gone? Well, the reason for that is we no longer have a floor in this second level. It's that union we created, and it got created outside of the second floor. So we can grab that in and rename this floor. Actually, that's the hole. So we'll rename this hole, and this is the floor. And everything else is either a wall or it's these things that are part of the stairs. Rename, can you? No, I don't think you can rename everything in one go up there, but you can do it here. So we'll say stair. So now that should work. Teleport to our Tycoon. Buy the dropper. Build the walls. Build the second level. Now we should be able to walk up there with our wonderful new stairs. Doop-be-doop-be-doop-be-doop-be-doop. Now you'll probably want to make yours the correct height so he's not actually climbing up each individual stair because they're slightly too far apart, but it works enough. So that's an easy way of making a second level on your Tycoon. And now we have a brand new place that we can just add some more buttons, add another conveyor belt and a cellar, or maybe even have it drop through to this cellar by making a hole in the sky. Right? All options for your game. But that's how you would make a second level. Basically, we've made it as a single model that is hooked up to a button. But now I want to make some windows, right? This is very dark when you create that. It's a little brighter now because we have a hole in the ceiling which goes to, not having a roof. But if you made this with a roof, it would go back to being kind of dark. So what can we do if we wanted windows? Well, we could make a brand new button that unlocks some windows, much like we just did with the second level. So what we'll start with is a brand new model, and this model we're going to call Windows. And inside there, we're going to create a new part, and we're going to move it to where we want this window to be. And I want it to be inside this wall right here. And just like how we cut a hole in the ceiling for the stairs, we're going to have the ability to cut a hole in our wall. So I'm going to make some windows like this. I'm going to create a hole like this, and I'm going to move it along, and I'm going to move it along again, so that I have these nice 3 windows which are going to be aligned into the wall, kind of like that. Now, obviously, I've not spent enough time, making sure that they're exactly in the center, but you can do that on your game. So now I'm going to union these things together so that they become a single part, right? And then I'm going to turn that union into a negative part, which means I can use it to cut a hole in these things. And now I'm going to put that into my Windows model, and I'm going to make a new button that points to my Windows model. So this one, I'm going to duplicate, I'm going to move it along. I'm going to change its ID to be Windows 1, in case we have Windows in the upper level too. And I'm going to make it point by changing the item to buy's value to my new Windows model, right? And whenever you add a new unlock ID, make sure you go through your helper script to say what unlocks it. Well, as soon as you buy the walls, I'm going to have you also be able to buy Windows 1. And Windows 1 itself won't unlock anything new, but maybe it would unlock, windows in the other walls or whatever. And in fact, we could duplicate these holes and sort of move them around so that they're windows all the way along. But this is just an example of how you can do it. So we have this negative part in the windows, but right now our code doesn't know what to do with a negative part, right? When we build this right now, what would happen is standing on this Windows button would show this model, and you would get in the game these pink blocks, which isn't what we want. We want it to cut a hole out of the existing wall. So what we're going to do is add a new object value to this negative part. And we're going to call it union with. And then we're going to point that union with value to be this part of the hierarchy, which is the wall that we want to cut something out of, right? So now if I go to the object reference, it's that wall that I just picked. So in my code, what I'm going to be able to do now is say, hey, if you're building a model with a negative part, look what part that should be unioned with. And then instead of just showing this negative part like you would normally for anything else, I want you to actually cut a hole from the part that we're unioned with. So that's how we're going to do it. So let's go into our code where we decide showing and hiding of items. And that is inside our helper script. We can go all the way down to the bottom where we have this show item function. And this basically already loops through everything in that model that you're going to show. So this is going to show our Windows model. And right now it checks to see if it's a base part. And if it is, it does all of this stuff. Well, we're going to add some new code that says if the part is instead a negative operation, a negate operation, which is the actual name of these things. You can go down into the class name and you see it's a negate operation whenever you turn a part into a negative part. So if the part is a negate operation, then instead of doing anything else, such as showing it and changing the collision, what we actually want you to do is union it with something. What do we want to union with? Well, this object value called union with. So let's get that. We'll say union with equals the part dot find first child union with, which is the name of our object value, dot value. And that is going to be a base part, right? We're actually getting the base part from our union with object value, which is whatever we've clicked in the hierarchy. Then every single base part has the ability to union with something, which will combine it, and also subtract from, which will sort of negate it. So that's what we want to do. We want to take that union with part, which is going to be the real wall. We're going to want to call subtract async and send in the part that we want to subtract from our wall, right? This is going to be the wall. We want to subtract something. What do we want to subtract? Well, the part that we're looking at, which is the window cutout part. Now, this has to be a sort of table of all the different parts that you want to union together. So we're going to combine this into a table simply by doing that. Now, what you would think is you were done, right? If you press union with on the toolbox here, that will combine the two into a new item. When you do it from script, it's not quite as easy. This function actually gives you back the new union object itself, right? And that will just be placed somewhere in the world, but not even in the hierarchy. So what you have to do is place this in the hierarchy by saying union.parent equals wherever we want to put it. So we're going to put it exactly where our negate operation was. So we can say part.parent, right? So the new union we've created, which is basically a wall with holes in, is going to be parented under this Windows model, because that's the place where the negative part is. Then we actually need to get rid of the old pieces, because they're still going to be around. This negative part is still going to be there in all its pink glory. So we actually have to get rid of that by saying part destroy. And then we can also say union with, which is the wall that we're union with, also destroy. So now, whenever you look through and try and show a model that has a negative part in it, we're going to come into this bit of code. We're going to find the thing that you want to union it with, and then we're going to cut it out with a subtract. We're going to put it into the hierarchy in the right place, and we're going to destroy those old pieces. So now, hopefully, if I test this, what we should see is the ability to firstly buy those walls. And once you unlock the walls, you can unlock a window for the walls. And now standing on those, you see we've actually unlocked a piece there. The reason that it hasn't worked fully, I think, is because it doesn't stretch all the way through. So let's take a look at our two pieces here. And you can see that it's clipping right there. So the problem is that you just need to make sure that whenever you cut a hole, you scale it enough that it's never going to have a little bit of clipping on either side. So now if we take a look, we should see it work much nicer. We'll buy that. We'll buy the walls, which unlocks these windows that you can purchase. And now, look at these. Nice windows. Hey, unfortunately, you can probably jump through them, which is maybe not what you want. So we can add some glass or something in there. And that's just going to work exactly the same as, what you would expect. We can duplicate these things. We can turn it so it's no longer a negative part. And we can sort of make it much thinner by scaling it down. Doop-a-doop-a-doop. So it's sort of glass in these things. We'll turn off that so we can make it a part. Sorry, I don't want to snap to parts either. So we can make it sort of a little bit there. And then move that into the center of these windows, which I guess is about here. Obviously, you're going to have to spend a little more time figuring out what the correct way is. But we can also make that into sort of a transparent, partially transparent, I guess, blue color glass. Steel blue. And now, because it's just part of that model, we don't have to change any of the code. We don't have to do anything special at all. And it should just get shown as part of our code for building windows. There you go. See? It didn't work at all. Now, why is that? Well, what we can take a look at is under our factory plot, under our windows, we have this union, but we don't have the other union that is our glass. Why not? Did it not have an anchored property? So whenever you create these things, make sure they have an anchored property. Otherwise, they're going to drop out of the world and you're not going to have any glass in your windows. So there we go. That should work. Make sure that your unions are anchored, just like parts. And now we have that glass in there, which is very, very gray. Not as blue as I was hoping. But it is actually working now. So you can customize this, of course, with whatever color you want. Maybe it's not transparent enough. Oh, because it's a union. Yes, the problem is colors don't exist on a union. The only thing that exists on a union is the color that came from the original parts. So what you need to do is change the original parts color to be blue, and I guess partially transparent, and then union it together, and now it will save that color. So do be careful when you're union things that your original parts before you union have the color you want. Otherwise, you're going to end up with that issue. So now we have... Oh no, don't tell me it didn't anchor it again. When I unclipped them, it got rid of the anchors. So do make sure that the parts are anchored when you actually create them. Otherwise, when you union them together, the anchored position goes away. There we go. Finally, some bluish glass in there. Lovely. So that's how you can make windows. You can change the code slightly to include negate operations and union them with something. And now we have the ability to make windows so that when I create this second level, it's no longer super dark because we have a nice way of getting light in the world. There we go. So that is the ability to create a second story and the ability to create some nice windows for your first story. And of course, this is just one set of windows. You could do the exact same thing by sort of duplicating these things, right? Here's an example. Duplicate it, rotate it around by 45 degrees at a time. Zoop, zoop. There's too many. And then move it into position, which is going to be the position of these walls right here. Zoop, like that. So you could have a second sort of button that unlocks these things, a second model for Windows. But for me, I'm just going to make sure that these are positioned within the wall, like so. I think that's okay. And now we should get a second set of windows when we buy this button. You could, of course, separate them out into another model. So when you duplicate it, make sure that you union it with the different part of the wall. Okay, so sorry that this is going so many mistakes, but you see I'm recording it live. So there we go. Now we've got two sets of windows. I don't really like the color of the steel blue, makes it look a bit funny, but yeah, lovely. Buy that second level now. Perfect. So one final thing we're going to look at in this episode is how to sort of add the ability to hide these buttons unless you've had enough rebirths. Now, this was actually called out in one of the comments as well as like a how could I do this? And I'm going to show you how to do it in this episode because it will kind of allow you to make your tycoon longer by saying, hey, you can do all of this stuff, but until you rebirth, you won't unlock this next level of things, right? So, for example, we could say, hey, you're not allowed to actually buy the next level of your tycoon until you've rebirthed at least once. And that kind of gives you another balancing point in your game to decide, okay, which part of my tycoon should be locked behind needing to rebirth a couple of times, or is it just going to be based on money, or is there going to be some combination and stuff like that? So it's probably kind of straightforward to do with our current mechanics. So let's take a look at how we can do that for one of these buttons. So let's take our second level button, which I think was this middle one. We can look down at the unlock ID, and it was. So in fact, I'm just going to move this over here a little bit because I want the windows to be close to the walls and the second level to be over here. So for this button, I want to say, do not show this button unless they've rebirthed at least once. And how can we do that? Well, we've seen how we can do special things for each particular button before by using tags and attributes. So what we're going to do, much like you can customize the cost, we're going to add a new number attribute and say, this is the rebirth required, right? How many rebirths? Rebirths? I guess you need an S there. How many rebirths are required for this button to show? So we can add this new attribute here and we can set it to a value like 1. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to customize our unlock code. So it says, hey, if you find a button that should be shown right now because it's been unlocked, also check if we have as many rebirths as their rebirth required attribute has. So if we go into our helpers function and go into the part of the code that deals with unlocking things. So when you buy an item, this is what decides, hey, what other buttons should be shown next, right? And luckily we added this comment here so we know that's exactly what it's doing. So what we can do here is we can say, okay, once you've found the next button that you're about to show, because it is the one that you want to unlock next, only show it if they have the correct number of rebirths required. So how can we do that? Well, it's going to be pretty simple. We're going to look up the rebirths required, which I'll just call RR, by saying, hey, get the attribute called rebirths required from that part, right? So as we're looking and we say, hey, we're about to unlock and show the second level button. And when we get that, we're going to look to see if it has an attribute. Now, not all of our buttons will have this attribute, so we have to take that into account. But if they do have that attribute and the profile.rebirths is less than, whatever that value is, then continue, right? If it has that rebirth required, so if there is an extra requirement on this button, but they don't have enough, then continue. Do not show the item. Continue is going to continue around this for loop, basically finding the next button that you want to unlock and continuing that loop. So the only problem here is we have no idea what that profile is, right? Because this buy item function only takes in a button. We don't actually have access to the profile. So there are two ways we can get access to this profile. One is we could send in the profile, as part of this buy item function. And then we'd immediately be able to look it up just like that. But that means we have to change all the other places in our code to say, okay, whenever we buy an item, I also need you to pass in the profile for this button, which kind of doesn't make sense to me. Like, we could do it like that. We could edit our code to send in the profile everywhere that we call buy item. But I think that buying an item should work regardless of whether or not the person who's calling by item has access to the profile. To me, that doesn't make sense. So instead, we're going to look up the profile directly in this function. Now, maybe you don't want to do it like that, but the reason that I'm doing it like that is because it makes more sense to me to have the buy item just deal with it itself, right? So we already have an ability to grab the profile for a particular button because we do that in our button script. But we don't do it in our factory script where we also call buy items. So I want the buy item function itself to sort of deal with it. So let's take this code and go into our helper script where we just were and grab access to this profile. But we only need to grab access to the profile if they have a rebirth required attribute. Otherwise, there's no point looking for it. So we can refactor this a bit. We can say if there is a rebirth required attribute, then look up the profile. Whoa. Why did it have so many weird spaces? Who knows? And how do you do that? Well, we use the helpers to get owner. We are in the helpers script, so that's actually called module. Module.getOwner for this button. And if we don't have a button, then continue through the loop and we won't be able to access this button because something went wrong. Otherwise, get the profile by getting the data for that particular owner. Now, right now, we don't have access to the data script. We are inside a module script ourselves, but there's nothing stopping us from saying that this module script requires another module script. That will work just fine. So we'll do that here. The only thing that you need to be careful of is one, accessing the correct service. So we can also grab that from our same button script, copy and paste. But the other thing you need to be careful of is a thing called a circular reference. Right now, we're saying the helper script is able to get the data script. But if we went into the data script and said, hey, this need access to the helper script, we'd have a problem because Roblox would say, I can't load the helper script until they get the data script, and I can't load the data script until they get the helper script. So you need to be careful of circular references when you do have a module script require another module script. We're going to be fine because we don't expect the data script to ever need another script. It's sort of self-contained. But do be aware of that if you are using module scripts requiring another module script. So for now, that's fine. We can grab the data script, which we can get the profile for, and then if we say continue, if it doesn't work. Otherwise, we'll say if the profile dot rebirth count is less than that, we will continue. So if it's not less than that, we're going to skip all of those continue statements and we're going to show the item. So that should work. Let's take a look. If we buy our first dropper, which unlocks the walls button, pressing this walls button should show the windows button, but you can see it no longer shows that second level button. Even though that's in the correct unlock order, our new bit of code is running and saying, hey, you do not have one rebirth, so this won't show. So if I continue with the Tycoon, though, and actually unlock a rebirth, doopy-doopy-doop, and then click on this button to rebirth, everything gets reset. Now, if I buy the walls button, which I can't actually afford because rebirthing resets my money, I should see both the Windows button and the second level button now because I have enough rebirths to purchase it. It doesn't cost me any rebirths. Of course, you could use that if you wanted to by changing the button script where we minus the cost from the money in the profile. You could minus the rebirths from the profile as well if you wanted to. It doesn't make sense for me, I don't think, but in your game, yeah, it could very well be that's how you handle rebirths as like another currency. So there you go. That's an easy way of doing it if it is based on rebirths. Now, the thing about our current unlock code is this only really runs these buy item functions like once per button, right? When you buy a new button, we check to see if a new thing should be unlocked by the purchase of that button. If you end up not using rebirths as your currency to show a new button, say you only want to show a new button that has access to the second level or maybe a VIP area or something, not based on rebirths, but maybe based on how many donations they've given to your Robux account, or perhaps if they've gone around and collected coins in your level, maybe if you have that mechanic. So if you have it based on some other requirement, not rebirth, you're going to have to run this bit of code wherever that changes, right? Right now, we're running this code when they unlock a new button because when you get a rebirth, it resets the state. So we run this bit of code next time they get all the way up to that button, right? If you're expecting the button to just suddenly appear after they do something else that isn't a rebirth, such as donating you 10 Robux, um, you would need to run this bit of code to actually check the currency and show the item in that bit of code that you've added, picking up coins throughout your level or donating Robux to your account, whatever. So just be aware that this bit of code runs here and it makes sense for this game because it's based on rebirths. So when you rebirth and it resets the state of the factory, you'll eventually get up to this button and run this bit of code again. If you're using a different currency, make sure you use this bit of code, but in that place where you collect that new currency. But there you go. So that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it, like and subscribe, leave a comment, ring that notification bell, all that good stuff, and I will see you next time.